If you've ever wondered what kind of cameras were used to produce the images we see on billboards and magazines, the most common answer that you'll hear is that these images were produced using high megapixel cameras, but that's not always the case. So let's talk a little bit more about megapixels as well as what it takes to produce these large prints. For those who don't know me, my name is Matt Kendall. I'm a full-time photographer and videographer. When we talk about megapixels, we're referring to the total number of pixels inside a camera's sensor, because there's going to be millions of them. This camera right here, for example, the Nikon Z5, it's a 24 megapixel sensor. What does that mean? Well, 1 megapixel is the equivalent of a million pixels. So Nikon Z5 with its 24 megapixel sensor means that you have 24 million pixels inside this camera. You'll find many of the cameras on the market range in how many megapixels they hold. They could have 12 megapixels or even 100 megapixels, but the more megapixels you want in a camera, the more money that you're gonna have to spend. This Hasselblad X2D, it has 100 megapixels and it's listed for nearly $9,000. But when you look at the Canon R6 with its 20 megapixels, it's currently priced at $2,300. Of course, there are other features that make up the overall price in these cameras, but megapixels definitely plays a role in that price. So what benefits do we actually get out of high megapixel cameras? Well, for one thing, we get the ability to crop in on images and still retain a fair amount of detail within the photo. Now, in theory, because there are more pixels in the image, the more detail there's going to be. So if you're someone that does a ton of cropping in your images like I do with aviation photography, for instance, then high megapixel cameras can be very useful. The other benefit that you'll find with high megapixel cameras is you can produce larger prints of your images and still be able to retain the finer details of the photo if you intend for people to look at your images up close. So it's easy to think that high megapixel cameras were likely used to produce the images we see on billboards, which can't be true, but I'm gonna let you in on something. I can produce images for billboards using a 20 megapixel camera thanks to something called pixels per inch. Taking a close look at this billboard right by my house, when we look at it from a certain distance, we can clearly make out what the image is, and we can even point out some of the details contained within the photo. But as we start to get closer and closer to this billboard, we start to lose those details that we were able to see at a further distance. That's because when these images are printed, they use a small number of pixels in a given square inch. Our eyes don't see that at certain distances, making the image appear clear and detailed from far away, but more pixelated as we look at it more closely. So basically, the number of pixels per inch is going to be based on how far away your eyes are going to be viewing the image that you want to print. Whenever we're looking at magazines or even our smartphones, we naturally tend to view them from about 1 to 2 feet away from our faces. The average number of pixels when we look at that distance is 300 pixels per inch. This is one of the reasons why it's recommended when you print any of your photos that you set the resolution to 300 PPI, because this is going to give you the best resolution of your photos, assuming you'll be viewing them from a short distance away to your face. However, if we set the pixels per inch for our images to 300 PPI, we're only going to be able to print that image to a specific size based on how many megapixels our camera sensor has. My Canon EOS R, for example, is a 30 megapixel camera, which means that the pixel dimensions on my sensor are 6,708 by 4,472. If I print an image at 300 PPI, I'll be able to print an image from my EOS R as large as 13 inches by 20 inches. That's if my goal is to print my images without losing any of the details contained within the photo. If I try to print that same image any bigger than a 13 by 20, with the resolution still set to 300 PPI, I'm going to start to lose the details within the photo. And to demonstrate this, I actually chose this image right behind me on my monitor that I took several years ago, and I printed it beyond the recommended print size with the resolution still set to 300 PPI. And this is what I got. As you can see, the detail is just not there. This is not a print that I would sell to any client by any means, unless I printed this photo at a lower PPI. So having more megapixels in your camera will allow you to print your photos even bigger than this if you intend on keeping the resolution at 300 PPI. Just remember it like this: the higher the PPI, the smaller your print is going to be. But the smaller the PPI, the larger you're going to be able to print your images. If we want our image to be visible and clear enough for people to see on a billboard, we can drop the pixels per inch to something such as 10 PPI, because this is going to allow us to increase how large we can print an image, and people are only going to be viewing that billboard from a far distance. Now, even with a set number of pixels per inch, the quality of the photo will also be determined by the material you printed on, as well as the printer itself. If you want to print an image at 300 PPI, you're going to need a printer capable of printing your photos at that resolution, known as DPI. DPI and PPI have equal values, but dots per inch is mainly used when we're referencing a print physically. Pixels per inch is referenced when you are working with the image digitally. If you intend on using high megapixel camera, keep in mind that the lenses you use might affect the overall quality of your images. So do your best to work with the sharpest lenses possible if your goal is to produce the highest quality photos out of a high megapixel camera. If you're starting out in photography and have been worried about how many megapixels you need in a camera, I would just recommend sticking between 20 to 30 megapixels. They're more affordable depending on the sensor size, and you'll still be able to produce those high quality prints for your home, photo albums for friends and family, as well as give you the ability to produce images for billboards if you find yourself needing to print anything that large. If you're still shopping around for your first camera, I have links to my recommendations in the description below. If you enjoyed what you learned today, please don't forget to like this video as well as subscribe to my channel. I'm planning to roll out more content on both photography and video very soon. And if you have a topic in mind that you want me to cover, please leave your ideas down in the comments below. Thanks very much for watching, and I can't wait to see you in the next video.